So welcome everybody to this today's SPOC webinar, the final one of 2022, this time co-organized with CMV and IDH. CMV is a trade union, and we're here now joined by their foundation, and IDH, the Initiative Sustainable Trade in the Netherlands. My name is Marieke Leegwater, and I'm really delighted to be your host today. This topic, labor in the palm oil industry, is a topic really close to my heart. I've been working in the vegetable oils and fats industry for 20 years now, and I've seen a lot of evolvements in the sector, and in particular also on this topic. When I joined the sector in 2002-03, a lot of things that were then normal are now totally not normal anymore. But I'm really excited to learn the latest today, and I'm joined by no less than 4 really high-class speakers, and you, an audience of now around 100 participants. So thank you again for being here, and thanks to the speakers. Shortly, we will start with 4 short introductions. I've asked the speakers to prepare a 6 to 8 minute presentation. And as always in these SPOC webinars, we will have ample time for questions. I've even asked the speakers if I can interrupt them for questions during the talk. So please send in your questions. You can also upvote the questions of others if you like. I try to keep an eye on them. And now first, a little run through. We have first Ruben van Brunsveld, who will speak about the new EU regulatory framework coming up, including the new EU rules against forced labor. Ruben works for RSPO. He's the Deputy Director of EMEA, the Europe region. And then we will have Lanesh Tanda, and she will speak about how labor rights and the labor situation is developing on the ground. She's based in Malaysia, and she has a very good understanding of everything that's going on the ground as we speak. Then we'll have Ranaka Ramachandran. She's the CFO of Sime Darby, a company who has been really actively dealing with labor circumstances on the ground. So she has a lot to share how they are now doing it. And finally, Maurice will speak about the perspectives of CMV and about how they see the potential for improvements of labor rights and the state of play. So thanks all for being here. I said it. You can ask questions along the way. I'll try to keep an eye on them. I want to share that this webinar will be recorded, so we can put it on the SPOC website, and we have about 75 minutes, so slightly over an hour. So without further ado and introductions, I would love to give the floor to Ruben. And I see now from Javier some chats. I'm using this app to record meetings and take notes with AI. So that's...
No, please do not. Nobody click on this link.
Okay.
We can't verify any links on this. A recording of this session will be made available afterwards. So Javier, maybe it's completely fine, but unfortunately, we will not be encouraging people to click links, external links. So please do not click external links from here.
Thanks, Owen. That's extremely useful feedback. And do I already see questions in the Q&A? No, I see only highs so far. So that means I think we can proceed. So Ruben, herewith, I would like to give the floor to you to enlighten us on the latest state of play on the EU regulatory framework. And Ruben works for RSPO, so I'm sure quite many of you know him. So thanks, Ruben. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Marieke. I'm not sure I can enlighten such a knowledgeable audience, Also an honor to be with these incredible, knowledgeable speakers. But the audience is also very impressive. And in 6 to 8 minutes, enlightenment might be a bit much to ask for, but I will do my best to share some insights. Let me share my screen. See if this all goes to, if this all technically works correctly.
Yes, you're doing it. Perfect.
But it's not on full screen mode yet.
Now it is.
Are you seeing the full screen now?
Yes.
Yes, excellently. Okay, so yes, I was originally human rights advisor for the Dutch government, worked in Brussels, and now at the RSPO as Deputy Director EMEA. I think what you see on the screen, however, says a lot more about me as a person, maybe more interesting than just rattling up a CV. Hello, everybody. Great to be here. Great to be with such a knowledgeable audience. I saw Norihan from the Embassy of Stockholm also. I am also joining from Stockholm, so I know the winter snowy weather that you are in. Perhaps we can meet up here in Stockholm for a coffee one of the days. Please do reach out. But let's get started. And I wanted to take a step back and use 1 or 2 of my 6 minutes to take a step back and recognize also where the discussion in Europe comes from, and that it historically, of course, has been a discussion mainly about deforestation, biodiversity loss, a lot of pressure from NGOs, which has been good, a lot of companies which have taken up that glove and really done a lot of hard work to work on these topics of deforestation, biodiversity. And I think we can say that that has been a success over the last couple of decades. What a lot of people might not realize is that global deforestation actually peaked in the 1980s, and since then, deforestation rates have been in a decline. This is data from ourworldindata.org, independent data. So I think that is really a testament to all of the efforts that the industry has made in the last 2 decades to curb that development, that negative development. A lot have been achieved, especially for Europe, where at this moment 93% of all palm oil imported into Europe for food, feed, and oleochemicals is actually already certified sustainable. So palm oil in Europe for these sectors is by and large a sustainable product. And this has resulted, amongst others, in the fact that in Indonesia in 2020, deforestation rate, thanks to the efforts of the industry and of the Indonesian government, fell by 75% to its lowest level since monitoring began. Now, in the early hours of the 6th of December, only less than 10 days ago, there was another landmark agreement in the EU, a regulation to ban products from the EU market which are related to deforestation, which will be a next step in minimizing or eliminating the EU's contribution to deforestation. So there's still a lot of work to be done, and especially at a global level, to increase the uptake of certified sustainable palm oil. And I think that's why it's important that Europe must continue to show its support for palm oil, because it is a certified sustainable product in Europe, and must show that there is a market for certified sustainable palm oil also for other regions in the world to take that up. But this success has, of course, led to the fact that we are now talking about a lot of other areas. And I think we will see in the coming decade that we will really move towards the social field. In many different aspects. The social field is now really the S of the ESG is now really taking up and getting a lot of more attention also from regulatory bodies inside of the EU. So I wanted to highlight 2 of these, and these are not by far all of them, but 2 of them, the main ones that are currently on the table in the European arena, and that is a regulation for an import ban related to goods related to forced labor, and a directive for social corporate due diligence. Now, for those of you who don't work with EU affairs daily, the difference between a regulation is that and a directive is that a regulation has direct binding legal results throughout every member state and immediately enters into force, while the directive needs to be transposed into national law. So that usually takes a little bit longer, but I will get back to these timeframes. So on the background of forced labor, it really comes from the EU's Action Plan on Human Rights and Democracy, which was announced in 2020. Then in 2021, the Commission published guidelines to assist EU businesses in taking appropriate measures to address the risk of forced labor in their operations and supply chains. And that was followed by the general elements of the proposal that were proposed on the 23rd of February 2022 in the communication on decent work worldwide. And on the right, you see also President von der Leyen in her speech on the State of the Union, where she says that we will propose a ban on products in our market that have been made by forced labor. Human rights are not for sale at any price. So it is not only from a legal perspective, but from a political perspective, something that this commission has really tied close to its heart and made itself politically dependent on. So it's very much a high priority topic now in Brussels. The scope of this one is different than, because if a lot of people thought it would be comparable to the one on deforestation that was just agreed on the 6th of December, but this one is quite different. This one will have a much broader scope in terms of products. It's not commodity related, but it's for any product that can be valued in money and is capable of forming the subject of commercial transactions. So basically any product put on the market, whether it's extracted, harvested, produced, or manufactured.
And Ruben, it's for products produced in Europe and imported, right? It's everything, or?
It's yes. So in that sense, it's comparable to the deforestation regulation. That it's also for products, of course, especially outside of the EU, but also inside the EU.
Thanks.
This one already foresees delegated acts, which was not the case for deforestation. And it's aimed at those who place it on the market, meaning making it first available of a product on the union market, or who supply it as a product for distribution, consumption, or use on the union market. So basically a very, very wide scope. Another difference is that this is not really a content regulation in the sense of that it directs itself to the companies on what they should do, but it's more aimed at the member states, and it gives a guide, a timeline. And here you see the timeline. You don't have to take pictures. I will send this presentation to Marike so she can distribute it to all the participants to this seminar. This is basically what the proposal says. It outlines the timeline, the procedure for when there is an indication of non-compliance, which can be made by a third party through risk indicators of the Commission itself, the database that the Commission is going to make, or other external third parties. So somebody says there's non-compliance, there's a risk. We have an indication that there's forced labor involved in this product, and then this timeline starts to work where the member state has to make an assessment, then request information, company can reply, preliminary investigation, and into an investigation. So this is kind of tries to make it as transparent as possible for companies also what the process will be. We have given, as RSPO, preliminary feedback. I'm just making sure that my time is not running out too fast. Preliminary feedback on this proposal. Of course, it has a lot of comparison to the US, where we've seen this for a longer time, and there is some similarities there. So we feel that we have to make sure that we cover some of the basic elements, such as that allegations should be really evidence-based, and not make sure that we cover that they're not unsubstantiated. That the investigation of the Commission has to be really substantial. We have to look at what happens to the goods as they are waiting outside of the harbor. Should they wait outside of the harbor? Of course, this is a huge economic cost. So there are a number of issues that we see that are not really outlined clearly in the proposal yet, that we have highlighted so far for the Commission. Now, the second one was the corporate sustainability due diligence, which is a little bit different. This one really lays down an obligation for companies to assess their actual and potential human rights adverse impacts, so both human rights and environmental, and to take measures to mitigate these effects and to remedy where possible. It has a clearer description of who it's aimed at, which you can see in the slide as well. I'm not going to go through all of that exactly one by one, but it is also a process definition in process regulation in that sense. And here you see the process that it prescribes. So you have to integrate your due diligence into your policies, take appropriate measures to identify actual or potential adverse impacts, then take appropriate measures to prevent or mitigate those potential adverse impacts, take appropriate measures to minimize or end them, establish and maintain a complaints procedure, which of course has to be transparent, accessible, etc. Then monitor the effectiveness and publicly communicate on your progress. And this is a cycle, so it must be done continuously by companies, which is very much in line with the OECD guidelines for multinationals as well. But it's interesting to see that this focuses both on human rights and climate change. Now, in this slide, with a lot of text, I will send this to you. I've put the 3 regulations kind of side by side with some of the main elements so that you can easily compare them to each other and see some of the comparisons, but also some of the differences in terms of scope, in terms of whether there's a benchmark, financial services, etc. So when you get this slide, you will be able to make a very high level overview of some of the main elements of the 3 proposals. So that was a very, very quick overview, but if there's anything I want you to take away from these, what is it now, 7 minutes, is this image. This ship is the law and it's coming at you. There is a lot of due diligence legislation being prepared currently in the field of human rights and other social areas, which is not only the case at EU level, but at national level. So we see here some of the ones. I just picked up a few headlines from Germany, from the Netherlands, France, Norway, the UK, where they're all preparing or have already instated due diligence legislation. So be aware, make sure you have the overview and make sure that your organization is prepared, would be my main message. And since it's Christmas, I wanted to give you all 2 small presents, and I will add these links into the presentation. The Sustainable Palm Oil Europe's Business Report from IPOA, RSPO, and the IDH, where you will find a lot of information about certified sustainable palm oil, and the RSPO Impact Report, where you can learn more about all of the impacts that certified sustainable palm oil has. So with that, I wanted to thank you for giving me these 8 minutes. And if there's anything else, please do reach out to me. RSPO members have a monthly member update meeting where they can join. So if you are an RSPO member and you want to join, please let me know. And for any other questions, you will also find my details on this presentation. Sorry if this went really fast, but Marike, I hand it back to you.
Thanks so much, Ruben. I think you did an amazing job of condensing these quite complex regulatory pieces into a really excellent overview. So I'm very grateful. Yeah, so I see some questions in the chat coming in, and my technical team is asking me, can we put them in the Q&A? So questions need to be in the Q&A. And I see a lot of thanks for the presentation, and I saw some detailed questions. So Ruben, what I'm going to do with the eye on time, I'm going to ask you to see if you can look in the chat and answer the questions, but then it stops, and then the real questions should go to the Q&A box. And then I'm going to give the floor to Lanesh of BC Initiative. That's a social enterprise very active on the ground in Sabah, if I'm not mistaken, on the field of labor rights. And then I'm going to ask Ruben, and I see compliments coming in. Thanks for that, to stop sharing the slide deck. And then Lanesh, if you could.
As far as I know, I have stopped shared. But...
Oh, you have stopped. Okay, good. So then we can go, Lanesh. May I ask you to just immediately the floor to you to speak about the labor circumstances you now experience in Malaysia on the ground, a real ground perspective. Oh, your presentation even called that way, so very nice. Thank you.
Lanesh, you are muted.
A classic.
Hi, sorry. Is Ruben answering questions first, or?
I asked him to answer some detailed questions in the chat. So and we move on with your presentation now.
Good morning, good evening, everyone. So my presentation will be the perspective from the ground perspective. So BC Initiative works on the ground. We work with impacted communities impacted by unsustainable development. And when I say communities, I also mean worker communities. Not working. Sorry, hang on. Why isn't it? Okay. So the data or facts that I'll be sharing on this slide are mainly collected from our worker communities that we've been working with since 2017. From 2019 to 2021, RSPO gave us the opportunity to do a RSPO outreach program, which actually was really, it really took us to the ground and allowed us a better insight as well on what was happening on the ground. So, to simplify things, we're doing it in two groups. We're doing two groupings. So one is certified RSPO members, and the other one are non-RSPO members. The reason why we're doing this is because when we work on the ground, the push for certified palm oil is really important for us, for those of us that work on the ground. We really need that push because this is the only leverage or platform that we have to address issues on the ground, especially with worker communities. So the reason why we're doing it as in a scaled approach is to show that with RSPO members, because we follow the international standards of human rights, it is closer to the theoretical ILO standards. And unfortunately, the non-members are still way towards the other end of the scale, because as Ruben rightly pointed out as well, social aspects have only just recently in the last couple of years just come on board. And so this is the big difference, and this is a huge gap that we have between voluntary certification and non-voluntary certification. So we also have in Malaysia, we have a phased approach with the mandatory certification under MSPO. And unfortunately, this is only just taken off. 2019 saw certification from MSPO companies in Malaysia. And it's taking time. It's taking time for us to get there. Under the outreach program, we had we were lucky enough to pilot a conflict prevention platform. On this platform, it started out in October 2020 and ended in March 21. The conflict prevention platform labor task force was set up because we were actually, the worker communities were requesting for a platform where they could share their problems on the ground, right? So 10 test cases were piloted. What we found was that the issues that were coming from the ground were mainly living conditions, wages, ghosting, unfair dismissal. These issues were frequent, coming up a lot, and the conflict prevention platform allowed members to engage with the conflicted party and also prepared a safe space for the worker communities.
Anesh, can you quickly explain what is ghosting? I'm not sure everybody is familiar with this term.
Okay, so ghosting is a term that we discovered was happening in plantations, especially during the COVID process when worker communities were leaving by the droves as well because of the COVID issues on the ground, right? So what's happening is that they were undocumented. So you'd have documents for workers, but you'd have 10 other people riding on that one document.
Aha. So
yeah, so that was something that came up as well. And I have to admit that when these issues came about and when we approached companies, a lot of the companies, you have to understand sustainability. The sustainable unit sits in a HQ, in an office, away from the estate level. So there is a disconnect from what's happening on the ground, and so when they found out about what was happening on the ground, they actually took immediate steps. And this is where we found that the conflict prevention platform was really, really helpful for the worker. Number one, because they were protected and they were in a safe space, but it also allowed companies who did not know that these issues were happening on the ground to actually address it in a manner that was not threatening to them as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so with the conflict prevention platform, what we found was that it's very important because it allows all the parties to engage, and it levels the platform. Number one, the worker does not have to represent themselves. Mainly, they were represented by they were represented by how do I go backwards? Sorry. They were represented by a labor task force that was sent up, mainly all volunteers, very passionate individuals who took on the cases. And then, because I think there was an increase in awareness as well since 2019 because of the outreach program. So with the buildup of awareness, the workers knowing their rights engaged with the labor task force to try and address these issues. So this was a very interesting time that we went through as well. And post this pilot testing, now in the last 20 months, it's still being run by these passionate individuals. What we are finding is that cases on minimum wages have spiked, mainly also because of the recent regulations where minimum wage has gone up to 1,005. And also the buildup of awareness that was created during the RSPO outreach program during 2019 to 2020. So with the workers, now that they know their rights, are willing to come forward and engage as well. So I think this is a very important aspect that we've come to. The other interesting thing is that what we find in Malaysia, there's more cases coming into the conflict prevention platform than there are in the complaints mechanism, probably due to the lack of access, or very difficult for workers to access mechanisms. I can't say much for internal grievance processes because we don't know, or we don't have a count on them. But what we are finding is more and more of these cases are coming up onto the conflict prevention platform. The other interesting aspect is that RSPO member cases are way lower than non-member cases. And for all its faults, RSPO is the only leveraging platform that we have when we work on the ground to address these cases. And it's the only leveraging that we get as well, in the sense that RSPO members are willing to engage to address the situation. And that's why my message or my ask from the European community, especially with what Ruben was talking about with the forced labor, EU regulations coming in and all that, is we need the EU community to actually demand for more sustainable palm oil, because only then there is a push for companies on the ground to go in the right direction, or to create a change and to work towards sustainability and to address these issues. I think that's my last slide.
Yeah.
So this is basically the experience from the ground on conflict prevention platform that we've been working on for the last since 2019. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lenesh, for really, really clear messaging. I think it's valuable to hear from you. The importance of the push the EU market is giving to drive, let's say, improvements, and we need this push to continue, but also to hear from you about the disconnect between, let's say, maybe what's sometimes happening in headquarters and what's happening on the ground. And I can imagine that such a conflict prevention platform can really spur up the developments. Maybe looking at the time, I propose again, I saw detailed questions to you, Lenesh. We're asking, can we please have them in the Q&A? And Lenesh, if you can have a look and maybe try to answer them in the chat. I saw Ruben just now doing a very good job. And then with that, I thank you very much. I propose we proceed with Ranaka. And yeah, so then we have time for some discussion and broader questions at the end. So Renaka, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you're the CFO of Sime Darby Plantation Company. So that's quite a role. So I really appreciate your taking the time to be here with us today. May I please, yes, you're getting ready to share with us what you've been up to the last 2 years in terms of labor circumstances in oil palm. We saw all your slides.
All right.
Thanks.
Sorry.
No worries.
Okay. Thank you very much, Marike, and good day to everyone. I'm here to share the Sime Darby Plantation story, our journey in relation to how we had to quickly come up to speed in terms of the labor practices in relation to the ILOs on forced labor indicators here. So let me just set up the context of what really happened. So as far as Sime Darby Plantation was concerned, we had the unfortunate experience of having an allegation filed against us with the US CBP way back in April 2020. That quickly turned into a WRO in December 2020. And in January 2022, about 2 years later, this was converted into a finding. What did that really mean to us? Ladies and gentlemen, as CFO of Sime Darby Plantation, I would be probably even more far removed in terms of the social expectations of the forced labor indicators. But what did it really mean to us in terms of the interpretations of the ILOs? Because we, as an organization, always believed, as a founding member of RSPO, the social pillar was met for all intents and purposes here. So how did it impact us? We were reputationally impacted from all angles, whether it was by our customers, our financiers, the external parties, and more importantly, internally, our own employees were questioning as to what did we really stand for as an organization. Is this what they signed up to, for that matter? Is this really what SDP is all about? I would say that we went through the 7 stages of grief. I think that's really, really an understatement. But after having grappled with it, we decided that we move on in relation to embarking on what we call a continuous improvement plan. And this actually was to go down to the ground and identify whether there were any gaps in relation to the adherence of the ILOs. So remember, the ILOs on forced labor indicators are guidelines. How it is interpreted or what was the original interpretation may have been 2 different things, yeah? And hence the objective of looking at ensuring that the standards were actually achieved was the direct oversight of our board sustainability committee and the senior management of SDP. And we appointed expert partners in the form of PwC and Ernst & Young, where anything financial was actually under their purview and automation. And more importantly, appointed Impact to do an independent assessment of the indicators on the ground and whether they actually existed or otherwise, yeah? Many of you are familiar with Andy Hall. He is an ethical recruitment specialist, and he worked with us in relation to ensuring that recruitment processes that are put in place are really something that is in line with the expectation of ILO. I'll come to Nixon Peabody in a little while. So what did this entail? It entailed a mapping of all the 11 ILO indicators to buckets of areas that we would address. And what you see on this slide is basically some of the key items that we've picked up. Obviously, the review entailed very much more than this, yeah? So items 1 and 2 are in relation to the introduction of strong enablers on the ground to address the situation. I'll just take a step back. And for those of you who do not know, Sime Darby Plantation's Malaysian operations entail approximately 152 operating units in its upstream segment, covering approximately 350,000 hectares. And for those of you who perhaps cannot comprehend what does that really mean, it is approximately 5 times the size, 4.5 times the size of Singapore. So the introduction of grievance channels and social dialogues assisted us in strengthening the enabler process so that our workers on the ground were comfortable in relation to what they raised. It became a trusted channel as far as the grievance channels were concerned. A new channel was introduced. And as far as social dialogues were concerned, it was something that we put into place as more in a more formal manner as opposed to an informal premise that was previously there. I will only talk about one other ILO on this page, and this is in relation to the elephant in the room, which is in relation to the reimbursement of recruitment fee and the remediation in relation to that. And that's the enhanced ethical recruitment fee policies. Way back in February 2022, Sime Darby Plantation made an announcement that we are reimbursing all workers, active and inactive, as of the 1st of November 2018, on all recruitment fee amounts that were determined by interviews conducted by Impact, and independent assessors of the workers, and different amounts were paid in relation to the countries that they come by. So this was something that has been done, and Sime Darby Plantation again was the first company in the industry to make that payment. To me, this is a given. It's something that the Malaysian industry, unfortunately, is subject to making this payment, largely because we are a company with a lot of migrant workers. So in relation to the next slide, this is our submission to the CBP. We are hopeful for a modification in relation to this process in the next couple of months. And so let's watch that space. As far as our report is concerned, it's all been submitted and we've closed all questions at this stage. So how do we sustain it? An ESG scorecard was introduced for 2022 that combined the requirements of all the pillars within E, S, and G, but you will see that for the interim year, there's heavy focus on the S component. And this ESG scorecard acts as a complementary scorecard to the main scorecard that is operational in nature, but if you talk about an exam, you need to pass this. Otherwise, you fail your entire test. This is a collective scorecard by operating unit in relation to how this is scored. So where and how do we move forward from here? I've often been asked this question, are we a better company? After having gone through this long exercise that took us approximately 1 year. I would be lying if I said that we are not. We are a lot more aware. Does that mean that we are perfect, that there is nothing happening on the ground? Again, obviously not. But we trust the management systems that are in place on the ground, that this would be then highlighted and brought forth, and all issues on the ground then will accordingly be addressed. And I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, things have been addressed, even resulting in termination of services. So where do we go from here? What can we do as a collective group? The workers' hotlines helped us as a company. It assisted us in relation to ensuring that cases were closed quickly. There was quick follow-up and there was satisfaction from the workers. We worked on one particular line with Nestle. It's called Swara Kami. It works pretty well. But moving forward, how do we share responsibilities as with customers, with other stakeholders within the industry? We should look towards normalizing, standardizing the forced labor due diligence audits, whether this is done as part and parcel of the RSBO ambit or otherwise, but it should be consistent and it should be standardized. We should have one standard, yeah? And in terms of the recruitment fee policies and practices, yes, it's a given, but where do we go from here? Should customers also be introducing their own ethical sourcing guidelines and insisting on these consistent standards and addressing other labor issues that they may be? As I said, as far as recruitment fee policies are concerned, it's a thing of the past. It has to be done. But we should be addressing other things: overtime, wages. SIMDABI is happy to say that we have addressed every single ILO and are comfortable that our operating units at this point are free of forced labor indicators on the ground. And as I said, yes, there will be issues, but we will address these issues as and when they arise. Yeah. I think that's it, Mariki. I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks so much, Anaka. I think you did an excellent job of sharing the journey SIMDABI went through over the last years. In the meantime, I saw some questions for Lanesh coming in. So allow me for swapping, please. And maybe some questions that are relevant for, a broader audience. So Lanesh, one question to you. Can you comment a little bit on what is about the conflict prevention platform? Can you comment what is the relation between the platform, the labor law, the maybe trade unions? So I think around the governance of the platform, how does it relate to other things?
So the platform relates in such a way that we have quite a mixed group on the task force that sits in there. So we also have union members that sit there. We also have advisory groups that sit there and help handle the questions. So I think one of the questions that was asked as well about the labor union was how is it different? So the difference is that most unions do not have access to workers on the ground, especially in Sabah and Sarawak cases where there's a lot of undocumented workers. So the conflict prevention platform, it's easily accessible to these undocumented workers and also to the workers that are not unionized. So this is one of the systems. But we have one of the local union groups. They're very strong and they help take on these cases as well. So we all work together. I think there was another question by Fami as well, asking about how do is the labor department aware? The labor department is aware, and there's very close discussions ongoing as well between the task force and the labor department. In fact, in some of the cases, the workers themselves have actually then gone on ahead to the labor department and made the complaints, made it into formal complaints. So,
thanks.
Yeah.
So Lanesh, is it an RSPO thing, this conflict prevention platform?
The conflict prevention platform was pilot tested under the RSPO outreach program. And quite interestingly, I was talking to Daryl Delgado from Verite, and she was saying that it's very interesting how the conflict prevention platform is being utilized so much by the workers at the moment. And probably the beauty about it, her expert comment was that the beauty maybe is because there is not so much bureaucracy related to it. And maybe it's because it's easily accessible, and the network that was set up post RSPO outreach program created so much awareness that it's actually the network has gone transboundary as well to workers that have left Sabah and Sarawak and gone back to Indonesia, Kalimantan, and then now they want to come back to Malaysia. So this whole interaction is going on a WhatsApp network thing, and it's huge.
Wow, that sounds very like ground organized.
I'm very impressed with by the worker communities that have set it up, actually.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I see you typing an answer on one, and Renaka, and a question to you. I like the question. Do you see any impacts from using the how did you call it? The questions are coming in too fast. Did you see the question, Renaka?
Yeah. I tried to respond already. But anyway, since you asked the question, yes, what we noticed is about a fourfold increase in grievances that were raised. Don't get me wrong, in Sime Plantation, we believe that if you raise grievances, that's actually good. So that, it is not about silence is golden, hence, the acceptance and the trust by the workers is at a heightened level, largely because we are able to close off these issues with consultation with them, that this is how it's being closed off, as we respond to their queries. And internally, we've got timelines, and we've got timelines in relation to each bucket and type of case. So it's very closely monitored.
Thank you. I see a question that kind of follow-ups from Claudia Sulowaska. Hi, Renaka, you mentioned you are forced labor indicator free. Do you regularly evaluate your plantations? Well, you just said you did, I think. And do you share your findings with other parties, such as NGOs, maybe?
Okay. So there's a few components to this, So at this moment in time, we haven't, but you know that we've done an independent review. An independent review was done by Impact. We have publicly also shared with the community that a summary of these findings will indeed be shared with the public once we basically clear the CBP review. And that was largely premised on legal advice at that point of time, So what do we expect to do? Yes, we do expect to do continuous surveys, and even if it's not a holistic review of all 11 ILOs at every point of time, there will be continuous reviews be done either by third parties or independently within the organization.
Thank you. So I did something today. I invited 4 speakers. So we have another speaker set to go. So I'd like to give him the floor now. Maurice van Beers from CMV, and Renaka and Lanesh, if you could kind of continue answering questions, that would be lovely. Maurice works for CNV, which is a labor, a trade union actually, and he works for the foundation related to that. Maurice, I'm hoping I explain it right now. So may I please ask you to shed your light on your perspectives on labor in the palm oil industry, and in particular where you think we should go from here.
Yeah, Marika, thank you very much. And also thank you very much everybody else at the audience to take the time to to dedicate your attention to this important issue, and also think to the other members of the panel. And it was quite interesting. And I think being the last one, I would like to focus really on what already is being mentioned on the importance of, for example, in the experience of Sam Dari of social dialogue, for example, within the company, but also the practice that BC Initiative has shown in their outreach program on really working on the ground on these conflict mechanisms. That's, for me, it shows a little bit that really engaging with workers themselves is very important, and their trade unions can play a very key role, or should play a key role. Also, if we want to be prepared for this new legislation in Europe that's coming up. So having said that, I'm going to share my screen. Let me see. I have to go to...
Wonderful. Thank you, Maurice. You're getting there.
I'm getting there, right? Yeah. I just have to get it on
Presentation mode.
presentation mode. Yeah.
Usually on
There
the
it
top.
is. Yeah, there it is. Okay. I would like to go through some issues. First of all, and maybe it's good to mention that CNV International, like Marike, you said it quite well. We are part of a Dutch trade union, CNV, but work internationally on the issue of development cooperation on labor issues, on labor rights. And we are a member of RSPO. We are part of some of the working groups within RSPO, the work group of human rights, the subgroup labor, the task force on living wage. So we are quite active within RSPO, and we really think that this is a very excellent platform to improve labor conditions within the sector. And I would like to go over some issues and small state of the play of what's happening right now in our view within the sector. Focus on social dialogue as a key issue, as a key instrument, and also on living wage, which is quite a big challenge also for different sectors, but also for the palm oil sector. And then some tools that we developed that might be of interest for the companies and for other stakeholders working in the sector. And of course, we are a trade union. We have a call to action. So that's I would like to finish with. What our research is showing is that, and we did this research with independent research centers in 2021. I can give you all the links towards those research on our webpage. But one of the principal things that came out is that RSPO is on the right track. The standard criteria, they're really very complete. What might need improvement is the enforcement of the standard. So the implementation itself, preventing labor violations of happening, but also if they have happened, how do you correct those, or how do you repair those? Key issues are most of all not in the whole sector or for the whole local production supply chain, but really related with outsourced female and migrant workers, like also the former speakers were mentioning. Those are really, or informal workers, those are really the groups of workers where problems occur. Forced labor, child labor in some places as well. And of course, in the same groups, living wage is often not paid due to piece rates, but also how informality, no formal contracts, etc., etc. And living wage for us is like a key issue, which is also the solution to quite some other kinds of labor violations. Having defined those labor issues, it's also very important to mention and to zoom in some other ones, which are related with the freedom of association, which freedom of association is important for workers to organize themselves in trade unions. And there we see in the palm oil sector in general that freedom of association and collective bargaining rarely exists. For example, in research that we did in West Kalimantan, we came out that only 3% of the plantations have a CBA, collective bargaining agreement, how you say it, in working. That means that from the 400 plantations, only 12 has a CBA. Well, that's quite that's quite worrisome. In Malaysia, there are trade unions active, but that's just a handful. In Guatemala, for example, there's none. There's none trade union active, for example, which is also very worrisome. Important, nevertheless, if you look at where the CBAs are active and where trade unions are able to do their work, you see that those are RSPO certified plantations. So that means that working together and having a certification active, for example, from RSPO, does make a difference. Some other things that may be good to talk about and what are of progress that we see within RSPO is that, for example, within the subgroup labor, there are several proposals being made at this very moment to step up capacity building and training on strategic labor issues. So that's very good. We also think that the improvements in the auditing guidelines on labor issues are really a step forward in the right direction. Maybe some more time should be given towards interviewing the trade unions and really take the time necessary for this, but it's really going into the right direction. If we're talking about the living wage task force, we think a living wage is a sensible issue, but we see that there are some new strategic proposals being supported by different stakeholders going towards an idea of let's take it step by step, including everybody within the sector, focusing more on let's map and let's try out to find out what's really the actual situation on prevailing wages, for example, and compare those and monitoring those. So that we think is very, very, very good, how you say it, progress in the sense of that it's really like starting to move. And that's very important. On the other side, it still gives an opportunity for companies that want to be a front runner, that say we want to move further in a more faster way, to, for example, to establish key targets and do want to work with, for example, benchmarks. Or with, for example, with tools like which are in the market right now, like the roadmap from IDH, which is being developed and presented last week, which is really a very good tool, a very good strategy to work with for companies. Then knowing this, what the situation is, what the progress is being made, then maybe just focusing in a little bit more on social dialogue. We've been seeing it also in the presentations of Sim Darby and also in the presentation of BC for Initiative, that it's really important to have this social dialogue on the ground, workers with employers together. We think that it really improves the quality of work, enables fundamental rights, and helps address root causes because you involve the workers themselves. You're talking about their situation. So we really think that makes social dialogue a key issue, and social dialogue is already institutionalized within all the core ILO conventions. So there is quite some institutionality ready to work with. Besides, trade unions through social dialogue can really provide some key services, which are, for example, to monitor labor conditions. If you want to know really what's happening, and that's, for example, also important, like Ruben was mentioning on the legislation, trade unions can monitor labor conditions. We'll come back to that later on. They can give input on the implementation of standards, how things are going, if it's a paper exercise or really like having impact. You can include progress made in collective bargaining agreements who are more sustainable over time. And
Maurice, I'm going to
yeah.
ask you to speed up a little bit.
Oh, I'm like trade unionists are very good in giving large speeches. I've also this. So I will speed up. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So, well, social dialogue really is a key issue, and trade unions can provide some key services towards other stakeholders in the sector. Okay, just two examples which we think are great tools to help this social dialogue. One of those is a SPOC database, which is part of a tool that is used by the financial sector to increase transparency. What we have done is doing a pilot in West Kalimantan. I already told you about some of the data coming out of this pilot on the situation over there. They revise CBAs, not only if they exist, but also the quality of the CBAs following the ILO standards. And we are thinking about to expand this to other areas and also to cross-check, for example, with if the standards that are present, for example, what kind of impact have those on the CBAs and vice versa. So that's one tool that's interesting. And the other thing is a fair work monitor. If you think about the importance of workers being active in social dialogue and also to have good information on what's really happening, also because of the upcoming legislation and the Forced Labor Directive, for example, it's important to have good information. And good information provided by workers, we think, is really something very innovative. And this Fair Work Monitor is able to provide it. For growers, that means that they can have evidence-based social dialogue because the workers will be like using a methodology and a tool that you can check and control and validate. And for companies, for buyers and traders, it gives them information on their supply chain, on what's happening on the ground. The tool is working with smartphones and apps in which trade unions help their workers to recollect information. Then going to the last part, and I hope I still have time, Marieke, a call to action. What we would like to say is it's very important to start, and I think the experiences of Sindarbi and BC Initiative already shows how the way to do this, to start working with joint pilots on the ground on the issue of social dialogue and also on living wages. And we need front runners. We need companies to really say, okay, we want to be involved, we want to start working on this on the ground. So companies with really plantations on the ground, of course, but also buyers and traders to play their enabling role, to start organizing those kinds of experiences on the ground. So thank you very much, Marieke. I can continue for hours, but I won't do that.
Thanks very much, Maurice. I feel very challenged as a moderator of you all because I'm very aware that I ask you for short speeches, but I felt very hesitant to interrupt you because your speeches were so good. So we have only 10 minutes left for some questions and things. So yeah, questions for Maurice are welcome in the chat. Maurice, I will invite you to look at this Q&A thing and maybe type already some answers. In the meantime, one question coming in for Lanesh from Desmond Loom. I hope I said that right. And he says, or she says, coming from a layman perspective, may I know how the conflict prevention mechanism differs from grievance mechanisms or internal company grievance mechanism? What's the difference, or how does that work or relate? Lanesh, may I ask you to comment on that?
Hi. So internal, from our experience, when we talk about internal grievance mechanisms, that means it's a grievance mechanism that is within a company. And most workers are from what we gather and from the discussions that we are having with worker communities, is that they're very reluctant to access these internal grievance mechanisms, because most often than not, it's the group that they are complaining about is the one that is going to be reading the grievance. So there's very little trust towards the internal grievance mechanism. That's one. The RSPO complaints mechanism is the other aspect of things, and that one is it's very odd. Indonesia, a lot of the workers access this mechanism, but in Malaysia, not sure whether they don't know about the complaints mechanism or the formalities of it, that they prefer to deal with a face, someone that they know that will take on the problem and then go on to try and be the intermediary group that discusses the issues, because they need safe spaces, right? So we created that safe space in the CPP. So there are similarities, but there's also a lot of differences. And also you have to be aware when we take on cases at the the conflict prevention platform, what we do is we don't engage with the estate on the ground. We engage with someone from HQ, from the headquarters, because it's easier. So there's a distance as well. So you have that separation so that things can be addressed in a better manner. So yeah.
Lanesh, I'm noting that there's quite some interest in the conflict prevention platform you're talking about, but maybe too little to address in the coming, let's say, 4 minutes. Is there a place where you can find more information online, or was the presentation maybe given at RSPO RT for people that think I am inspired and I want to dive in, something like that? Is there a place, or they should just contact you? I don't know.
No, actually, because the RSPO, the conflict prevention platform was actually piloted by RSPO in the Malaysian RSPO outreach program, right? So there were a lot of policy documents, the pilot testing that took place. So all the reports are lodged with RSPO. So I'm sure those reports are for public consumption as well, because all names of companies who engaged with us during the pilot testing are not documented in those reports. So yeah, I think it's publicly available. I have copies, so if anyone wants to, I think I can share those copies with the permission from RSPO, of course. But also because we've been so busy dealing in the last 20 months, taking up the whole conflict prevention platform cases, and the cases, like I said, has spiked. So we've been dealing with it so much that we don't actually have the time to, sort of sit down and document it all properly. We have individual cases that have been documented, but we've not sat down or had the time or space to actually put it all in a document.
Thanks. I think this shows it shows the relevance and the importance of the work. And I think, let's say, we as SPOC can maybe together with RSPO or IDH CMV look into if we can maybe even support in making some information available. I am a bit in doubt how to use the last 4 minutes. I saw this very interesting question on mechanization coming up, and labor shortage mechanization. Do I dare to ask you a quick word on, let's say, those on the ground? Maybe Renaka, if you want, you probably most close. What do you have any reflections to share on that? The impact of mechanization on labor rights and circumstances.
Okay, Maria, let me attempt, yeah? So at this moment in time, there's so many activities in a plantation, but as far as mechanization is concerned, it best works as far as things like fertilizer, spraying, and maybe loose fruit picking. that is the area where machinery works better. So the intention is so that you attract workers to the plantation, and workers do not see this as, well, either a very laborious job or a dirty job or a difficult job. And it gives them the opportunity to use machinery in the process of the entire activity. So it's no different like in the US in a wheat farm, for example, or something like that. Yeah. But the challenge obviously is in relation to harvesting, where at this moment in time, at least as far as Sime Darby plantation is concerned, we've not been able to maybe break the bone or whatever you call it from a commercial perspective yet. So it will take a little time. Probably that is something that you will see maybe being activated quite significantly by the industry in the next 5 years.
Thank you. So hopefully it makes the jobs more nice and attractive. That's
yes, exactly.
Yeah. Clear point.
Can I add something to that, Marika?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, I thought, I mean, obviously that will impact the large industries and plantations as Sime Darby first. And that is the hopeful scenario I think that Renake is presenting. And it is, of course, a question that goes far beyond palm oil, right? I mean, we've seen this in lots of industries, and it is important that we think of it as a socially responsible way to make this transition. I also wanted to point out that in Malaysia, 40%, and in Indonesia, up to 60% of the production still comes from smallholders, and this is growing actually, for instance, in Indonesia. Yeah. And there, this is not such a point at the moment just yet, and I think that's another reason why it's so important that, especially also the European market continues to support sustainable palm oil, because we have to realize that that's so important for these smallholders in the producing countries.
Thanks, Ruben. You touch upon another question that, how does this all apply for smallholders? I think that's that probably merits another webinar. We're coming to the end of the time. I think I want to give you all one closing word. The reason, and with the focus on, because we are addressing these webinars in a way to a European audience, in a way, if you could, let's say, give European audience one message of how to support or drive improvements, what would you say? Maybe first to, well, let me be free. If you want to comment on that, that's fine. If you want to comment on something else, also fine. Final words first by Maurice, maybe. And don't talk too long.
I was about to say you that's a risk if you give me the words first. Okay, now first of all, for the European audience, I already said my message, like we need front runners, get involved, and let's go to the work on the ground. And there was one comment, and I didn't achieve to respond on of Zulkifli on living wages. Living wages is a complex issue. But really, it can. Then the question was, are there examples of living wages being implemented in a sustainable way? And my response would be like, trade unions and collective bargaining agreements show that you can really achieve better wages in a sustainable way. So combining all the tools, like for example, IDH is promoting and creating, and the whole discussion on living wage with more involvement of trade unions, that's really the way to go. And we have quite some practical ideas for this, and we would love to work together with the sector and with companies in Europe on this issue.
Thanks, Maurice, and thanks for being here. Then to Naka, maybe?
I mentioned this briefly as I closed just now. If you asked me what would my dream of consistency be, it would be for a consistent, for customers to look consistently at their ethical sourcing guidelines. This is a European messaging, yeah, because America
Yeah,
is still-
ethical sourcing guidelines. That's a
Yeah.
topic close to Solidaridad's hearts. We'll be having some messages coming up on that at Solidaridad. Thanks, Renake, and thanks for being here. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Lanesh, over to you, maybe? Some dreams, closing words? The answer you didn't give to the most prominent question.
I'm not sure actually. I think. Okay. So if there's any processors, traders, CGMs on this.
Yes,
on this,
there are. I've checked the
okay.
audience list. I can't share, but yes, there are.
Okay. So my thing is to make sure that whomever that you send to your supply chain, trainers or anything like that, have better understanding of the realities of the ground, to address situations and not to, because sometimes what we are finding as well on the ground is that CGMs or processors traders send in to try and do training for the supply chain, and they're teaching them wrong things on the ground. And this is creating creating more damage than, helping the situation. So I think this is something that due diligence is very important, and the ethical aspect that Renaka brought up is also very, very important.
Thank you. That's useful. Bring ground realities to ethical sourcing. That's the main point, right? Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much. Then Ruben, over to you. I thought I'd give you the last word because RSPO played such a cross-cutting role in this webinar throughout, and you were the first, and I give you the last words for dreams, closing remarks.
Well, Marika, thank you. And it's always very dangerous to introduce an elephant in the room in your last sentence, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Oh dear.
The one that we have not touched upon for the European market is, of course, the negative reputation of palm oil amongst consumers and customers, and the demonization of the product as such.
Yeah.
And there, I just really want to have a final call to say that I hope we have shown that it's not about the product, but it's the way about it's being produced. And that if you produce it in a sustainable manner, that is a crucial commodity. And if Europe would turn its back on palm oil, and you see more and more no palm oil claims coming up, that would be a very dangerous way to go. The alternative that is being used is usually less sustainable in terms of water, in terms of ground use, perhaps not even certified. So for all of its imperfections, as Lanesh said, RSPO certified sustainable palm oil, I think, is still the best alternative that we have for against conventional palm oil. So I would really call on everybody in this that's listening to make sure that you keep supporting that you go to your product, your favorite products, your brands, ask them if they use palm oil, if it's sustainable, and if they do, communicate about it. Because I think an open and honest and transparent discussions about the challenges and the benefits of certified sustainable palm oil in Europe is high time for that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ruben. And it's really great to have you as an advocate also for this position. I think as from Solidaridad side, we couldn't agree more. And this is also why we're supporting the SPOC initiative to promote more balanced communication around palm oil in Europe. So I'm really eagerly looking forward to 2023 and see what we can do more on this topic as well. Because you're right, the image of palm oil in Europe is we call it stuck in the past. If you look at how much progress has been made and what everybody's doing, in particular producing sustainable palm oil. So thanks so much for bringing that out, Ruben. Then with that, I would like to thank all our audience for bringing out their attention, energy, really good questions. I'm going to give them a hand. That probably sounds weird. And I would like to thank the panel members. I saw in the chat the compliments about the clear and useful, insightful presentations. And I totally agree to that. So thanks so much to all of you. Thanks to my technical team supporting me, and looking forward to collaborate with all of you in the new year coming up. And I wish you all the very nice, let's say, festive days with Christmas coming up. So thanks everybody, and I will leave it here and to be continued. Bye bye.
Happy New Year. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thanks
Thank you very
all.
much.
That's
Bye.
easy for everybody.
Hey, I think it's dropped to 75. They dropped already.